Hello, in this video, we'll be getting started with the Raspberry Pi. Now, we'll be assuming that you have one of the models 3, 4, or 5, such as the 3B Plus, with varying degrees of RAM and peripherals. It also assumes that you have reliable access to Wi-Fi and a number of basic peripherals, such as a USB keyboard, USB mouse, and an HDMI capable monitor. So as I just mentioned, what do you need? Well, a Raspberry Pi, a line model preferably, although a lot of this video can apply to the Zero models as well. I'm going to assume a 3B plus, a 3B, a 3A plus, a 4B with any amount of RAM, or a 5, which is also a Model B with some amount of RAM. More RAM is going to give you better performance, but it's strictly not necessary for this video. Each of them has onboard video and Bluetooth, along with some USB ports, HDMI output, and Ethernet, assuming that you have a Model B. You'll also need a micro SD XC card, preferably A2, but A1 might be fine, and U1 for at least the Model 3s, A2 and U3 preferred for a 4, or a A2 and U3 for a 5. The absolute max that you can be using for storage is 2 terabytes, although there are some other limitations to that. You're not going to find a 2 terabyte micro SD card. 8 to 16 gigabytes might be fine for a bare bones system, especially if it's on the Model 3. You really want at least 32 to 64 for general use. It won't leave you too much room once you've added a lot of stuff, but if you can wing it, go for 120 or even a 256. Although 256 and definitely 512 is it just gets prohibitively expensive. I mean, at I think 512, you're looking at like $150. Um, 4 and 5 also have support for USB 3, so USB solid state drives are much more viable. They're not really good for running for an operating system on the 3s. 5 also has support for PCIe. So with the right hat, you can actually mount an M2 drive, either SSD or an NVSe. Again, USB keyboard and mouse. They can be any quality as long as they work. You might just be using this for initial setup anyways. An HDMI cable, keep in mind that the Model 4s and 5s use micro HD, so you'll possibly need an adapter. An HDMI capable monitor of some description. It doesn't have to be fancy. As long as it has an HDMI input, it can just be something that runs at 60 hertz, and you should be fine. You're going to need a power supply as well. It's going to need to be capable of 5.1 volts, and it can run anywhere from 2.5 amps, 12.5 watts for Model 3s. For Model 4s, you're going to need 3 amps and 15 watts minimally. And then for the Model 5s, you're going to need 5 amps and 27 watts. Keep in mind, you might see the plug and think you can just use any old USB cable. It won't be enough power. Some models, the 3s, use the micro USB. I can't remember when they started using USB-C, but you've got better power delivery with those, though. There are some USB power delivery standards and cables that can do 5 amps, but I would hunt up a proper power supply. If you don't, you'll get under voltage warnings and unpredictable behavior. Otherwise, could it damage the Pi? Long-term use, maybe. I think initially it shouldn't be too much of a problem. Now, before we really get further, I really need to talk about heat and temperature. Obviously, in other videos, I've told you that electricity dissipates as heat, and this is really true for a computer, whether you have a laptop, tablet, smartphone. You'll notice they all get hot and warm. If you have a pretty hefty desktop, it's got a lot of cooling fans, maybe even liquid cooling. If you've ever, a traditional laptop had it on your lap and it just about burned you, you get that. So the older models could get away with just a simple heat sink, and it would keep it within cool. By cool, I mean between 30 and 60 Celsius, or kind of a warm zone, which is 60 to 80. Um, but it's definitely you want a small cooling fan for the models 4 and 5. When I say the danger zone exists, it sort of starts at about 80 Celsius, give or take. This is where the CPU starts to throttle or reduce its performance to try to reduce temperature. If this temperature is still rising, it'll really double its efforts. When it reaches like 85 Celsius, you'll start to see some performance issues as the CPU slows down to reduce the temperature. Now, once you hit about 90 Celsius, you're going to get an emergency shutdown. It throttles it to a point of it might as well shut it down, or the heat itself just starts to drastically interfere with the operation. Again, we've talked about components. There are always limits, especially temperature. Even prolonged operations around 80 Celsius or above or long term can really affect the system and cause actual damage. Personally, I usually start to get concerned if it starts to reach about 70 Celsius. Maybe I allow it another degree or two, especially if it's on heavy load, but I won't let it reach that initial danger zone of 80 Celsius. Um, Good news though, the Pi 5 has its own little tiny connector for a fan, so you don't have to plug it into anything else. And with the Pi, yeah, you want a pretty beefy heat sink and a cooler fan. The official ones are great to have. This is not where I would skimp and try to save a buck or two. Get yourself the official cooler fan and the heat sink. Make sure the heat sink is pressed down on gets CPU, the RAM, and something else. Basically, you see a big chip sticking out. You want a heat sink attached to that, and then a fan on top of that. Uh, Model 4, I would still get a fan, but your options for plugging in can be annoying. For the Model 3, it's nice, especially if where it is, you're not going to get a lot of airflow. Um, but I've had it sitting on windowsills on a sunny day, and it was pretty fine, but not required. But again, if you want to put it in just to give a little extra oomph, then go for it. Now let's talk about micro SD XC cards. These are going to basically act as the hard drive for your Pi. The A1s, this is basically the A rating is the amount of input output operations it essentially does. You'll notice the A2 is a lot faster, although they both are doing 10 megabytes a second. So you want to go with A2 if you can get away with it. The official ones are going to be A2 and U3. You might pay a few more bucks, but it's really not all that much more. Um, the official one, as I said, official one's A2, U3, V30, and C10. V is about video. I can't remember off the top of my head for C. Um, but the official ones probably aren't all that expensive. A basic 32 one is going to run you maybe 15, 20 bucks USD. 64 is not going to be much more expensive. 128, yeah, just a few more dollars. Where it really jumps is when you get to 256, and then you're starting to look at 40 or $60, but that's still not unreasonable. But if you go for a half a terabyte card, you're looking at like $150. Um, but 32 gigabytes, that's good enough. That's definitely good enough for Pi Lite on the Zero models. I mean, that should be sufficient. You can maybe even get away with it on a regular Pi model, but it'll be a tight fit, and you're going to have to be constantly deciding what applications to keep or get away with. 64 is probably the best value if you're looking to save some money. It should be more than sufficient for any of the Pis, except when you're dealing with a lot of video, big files. You want to throw your music collection on there. That's where you want to go with 128. I would say with the 4 and 5, probably go the 128 if you can afford it. Again, it's only a few more dollars. Some of those kits, though, they really upcharge you on the components they include. You can use mini applications. You got plenty of room. I would say only go with 256 if you really, really need the room. If you're looking at 512, generally not worth it. If you got a Pi, get yourself a hat and a cheap NVSe drive. I think you can get maybe a quarter or a half terabyte for maybe 50 bucks USD. So yeah, once you reach that 512 price point with the 5, it's better just to look into using an actual proper hard drive, which is going to be a lot better. Um, but yeah, I mean, you could do 50 bucks for 256, And even SSDs as opposed to NVSEs are going to be so much faster than the access times you get on a card. And actually, that was part of the reason for the PCIe support on the Pi to begin with. All right, now you can either get an SD card that already has an OS on it, usually Raspberry Pi OS. If you buy it in a kit, you'll probably already get that, so you don't need to do the rest of the work. If the kit looks shady, like it's not CanaKit or something, you might be a little weary of the SD card. Um, or you can just buy something, a standalone one. Definitely, I would go with the ones authorized by Pi Foundation. You don't want to risk there being viruses or something on it once you plug it in. But you can just get the card yourself, install the operating system on there. You'll need some kind of adapter, but small ones are usually cheap. Just something you can plug into USB with your computer. Now, if you've never plugged SD cards or whatever into your computer, there might be a little bit of a learning curve. It should just pop up as another drive. I'm assuming that's the way it is on Mac OS. I don't own a Mac, I never have. I've only used Mac OS a little bit over the years, but I'm assuming it works the same. This video isn't going to cover troubleshooting the card adapter or anything like that. It's going to assume everything shows up in a drive when you plug it in, and at that point you probably will be fine. Download the latest Raspberry Pi version 3.4.5. They're pretty much going to use the same thing. Currently, the current version is going to be Bookworm. Every major version, they give it a different name. I don't even remember when I started, to be honest. There are other options for other operating systems, especially Linux-based ones. There's a lot of people who love Ubuntu. It's much more user-friendly, although Raspberry Pi OS is not all that bad. You can go full Debian, Gentoo, Fedora, Red Hat. I mean, there's a list. But honestly, if this is your first time using Linux, first time using the Pi, just go with the easiest thing, and that's Raspberry Pi OS. You can download an official program, Raspberry Pi Imager. It makes it very easy. It's available for Windows, Mac OS, and 64-bit Linux. 86, 64. The program just lets you kind of pick and choose from a bunch of different options, and there's a bunch of non-Raspberry Pi OS options as well. It should set everything up correctly. Just let it do its thing, and then inject media, and you should have a basic hard drive for your Pi. Now, this is assuming you've gotten everything plugged in, you got yourself a monitor plugged in, power supply, you've put the SD card into the little space for it that's sort of hidden in the back at the bottom. Might be a little harder to real if you've got it already in a case. There's usually just enough space to you slip it in there on the back, and you should have everything plugged in. You plug in the power supply, assuming the power supply is good. And up on the monitor, once everything connects to the monitor, you'll see a bunch of fast scrolling text. It's basically just telling you all the services it's turning on, things it's checking. It does it pretty fast and efficiently. That's going to kind of depend on the Pi. You're still probably going to need to give it at least a minute or two, a couple of minutes, especially the first boot up. You might see a graphic or two. I know that's changed over the years. You might see some monitor blinking before you get to the initial prompts. That's normal. It's just trying to find the best connection for your monitor. It'll tell you to set the device host name. You may need to set it to something specific in your situation. Otherwise, pick whatever name you want. Yes, this is something you can very easily change later. Set your time zone, locale, those kind of details, username and a password. This account should be set as an administrator with super user access automatically. Your setup might be a little bit different, but that should be the default. Set up your Wi-Fi details. This will be extremely important. Then how, if you want to connect remotely, there's some options that'll really push using Raspberry Pi Connect. This is not a bad option, actually. Keep in mind with your LAN, your router, you might have unforeseen internet issues that you have to resolve. This video isn't going to go over those because there's so many routers and setups. I couldn't possibly address all of them. If you want to access this remotely through like a command line interface, enable SSH. We'll be talking about that a little later. If you set it up correctly, you'll basically just be able to remotely access this, and you can ditch the keyboard and the mouse and the monitor if you want, and just kind of set it up just about anywhere. Make sure you got the internet set up. I'm assuming Wi-Fi. Maybe you have to plug it in for Ethernet for whatever reason. All the Model Bs will definitely have this feature. This is especially important at the beginning of using this because it's going to do a bunch of upgrading, updating, most likely, especially if you've gotten a pre-built card from somewhere. It's probably not going to have the most up-to-date software on it, but don't worry, everything will update. You'll probably get the option to set up Bluetooth, maybe connect some Bluetooth devices if you wish. I would keep the USB keyboard and mouse on standby just in case you run into a problem with Bluetooth. Pick a default web browser. I recommend Chromium for the Pi. It's really built better for that purpose. It's built for Chrome OS, works pretty good on Pi. My experience with Firefox and the Pi is pretty mixed, but it really depends on the model you have. And then just if it automatically starts updating and upgrading things, go grab a cup of coffee, go take a shower, let it do its thing. How long that's going to take is going to depend on a lot of factors. It could be a couple of minutes, it could be 20, 30 minutes, maybe on the outset. Just basically let it do its thing. Now, a question you might want to ask yourself is, do you want to use a graphical desktop environment or you want to use command line? You can set it to basically boot in either. Not booting into the GUI does save a lot of system resources. Half the programs it's going to run in the back have to do with the desktop GUI. So if you really want to reserve those things, then you could just boot it to command line. Now, keep in mind you're not picking one or the other permanently. You can use the desktop environment to open up a terminal program to use the command line. You can launch the GUI from the command line as well. There's a couple of different ways to do all of this. If you use Raspberry Pi Connect and you get it set up correctly, if you're running it in desktop, it's going to give you options both for remote shell and then actually using the desktop. Keep in mind your mileage is going to vary depending on connections. The default desktop GUI is usually LXDE. Model 4, I guess, added in Mutter. 5 still has the looks of LXDE but under the hood, it's now using Wayfire, which is a Wayland compositor. Which before that it was X11, and there was a lot of limitations to X11. Wayland is basically better unless you have hardware sold; it just can't use it. Um, the real desktop answer of what's running in the background, it's a lot of different programs just sort of working together. As desktop GUI stuff in Unix like systems was literally built brick by brick instead of kind of all at once like with Windows. So, be running Wavefire, that's a compositor, panels and taskbar, that's another thing. You got a file manager, you got terminal emulator, screen lockers, and all sorts of other stuff. I mean, you're looking at 20, 30 programs just to give you the full desktop GUI experience. I already talked about Pi Connect. Runs in a web browser. That means like anything with a web browser you can run, or at least anything modern. The GUI Connect, the desktop, I've done it on the Model 3. It's basically a slideshow. Higher end Model 4, it's probably better. Model 5, it's actually pretty usable in terms of a remote desktop experience. Command line is also provided by Remote Shell. As far as I know, it's basically SSH with some other stuff thrown on it. Command line is the basic Unix-like experience. If you want to feel like a real hacker, you know, use command line. If you are of a certain age, and at this point, just about middle age, you probably used MS-DOS back in the 80s, and the command line experience is extremely similar to that. Or if you've been adventurous and you've been using command prompt or PowerShell with Windows, similar experience. But if you're completely new to that, you've never known a time in your life without a smartphone, yeah, the command line can be a learning experience. I do not doubt that. Most of my videos are going to focus a little bit more on the command line and using Bash, which is one of the shells available for command line. There are a lot of other options. Problem with covering desktop environment is there may be one thing that's running different and that could affect how things are, but one desktop GUI to another is somewhat similar enough these days in Linux. So you've gotten everything set up. Maybe you're using the desktop GUI. Maybe you got Adventurous and you're using command line. Make sure that you can set up Wi-Fi, Bluetooth. Mind you, the response times aren't going to be as fast as a reliable modern desktop. You are dealing with lesser resources, an ARM processor, which isn't super new, even if you have a Pi 5, which is going to be the best you're going to get with the Pi line. But yeah, don't expect the same things you would out of Windows or Mac OS. This is a bit more of an adventure. Make sure to do full upgrade and update. This is going to be different depending on the Linux distribution, but Raspberry Pi OS is Debian based. So basically, it's Debian tailored for the fact that it's running on an ARM processor and then it's a Raspberry Pi. If you're using emulator, a terminal emulator command line, some of these commands have to be launched by what's called the root or the super user. Your administrator account does have root access, but it is not the root account. You actually do not want to log on to the root account under almost any circumstances. I think the only time I've had to really log on to root was I screwed up something with the account system and either locked out all the accounts from root access or deleted them. I had a lot of adventures with Linux over the last just about 30 years at this point, actually. I'm old. So sudo app full upgrade with a dash Y. Do that first, and then do either a shutdown halt or a reboot. If you do a halt under the default settings, it will just halt the computer and basically cut off power, even though you'll still see the light. At that point, you can just safely unplug. It's effectively a shutdown. Um, and then reboot is just a reboot. There are cases where you want to do the halt maybe instead of a reboot. Either or should be fine. Just remember with the halt, you unplug the power, give it a second, plug it back in, and it should boot everything back up. If you really need to clear out like the RAM and stuff, you want to go with a halt. Reboot should be fine otherwise. It could take a couple of minutes. It's not going to be instantly back up. In my experience, it's not as fast as the under a minute, boot up times on Windows or whatever, but a couple of minutes, and as long as it reaches a command line or a desktop GUI, it should all be fine. As I said, the command line runs a shell environment. The default one is bash, which is born again shell. And then there's command line commands that are sometimes shell specific. You can even actually program in bash. It has a whole scripting language and some other stuff, and other shell environments have that as well. If you've enabled SSH, you can just easily access command line from remote. Again, if you want to feel like an old-fashioned hacker. Now, Unix-like systems, when they were originally designed, they were designed to be connected to by teletypewriters. That's where the TTY comes in. You basically have a keyboard, you'd have a printer, sometimes you would have punch card stuff on it as well. Eventually, going into the late 60s, early 70s, you started getting video terminals. Sometimes they even still had printers attached to them, but you were getting a video monitor, a CRT, along with the keyboard. Hey, no more paper waste, I guess. And it was connected via serial ports, and it was usually running directly to the mainframe that was actually running the operating system. Individual terminals probably had numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 27, whatever. Um, you could have, operating terminals near the computer. You could have them in a couple of computer labs, but it was still just serial connections. Remote sessions started to become a thing because modems started to become popular. You could now talk to the mainframe over just standard telephone lines. I mean, there were some serious limitations to that, by the way. And one of the standards protocols to actually connect that, you'd make the modem connection, was Telnet. There were a couple of others, but they all were kind of similar. By the early 80s, it was standardized, so Telnet was Telnet was Telnet. But it was pretty insecure. Like you could tap in a wire in the middle and essentially get all the data. Then SSH came along. I think it came along in the early 90s. By the mid 90s, it was used a lot, kind of alongside Telnet, because there were far fewer clients that could handle SSH compared to Telnet. But at this point, you might as well just run SSH. Telnet is a heavy security vulnerability. Even I've stopped using it. In both cases, they're basically very similar. You want a host name, an IP address, local address, something in a port. That service has to be running on that port. Keep in mind that area networks with a router You basically got a computer that's handling multiple internet and network connections in an area with a router. In fact, that router actually might be running a version of Linux, like Kali Linux. Linux is everywhere. Linux is probably on potato clocks. And you need, taking an external port, linking it to a particular internal port to a specific device. I might make a video eventually on routers in general, but there's no way I make an entire series on every single major one, and it'd be too much work. But throwing a bone for some concepts wouldn't be bad either. So LAN routers, you might have to set port forwards and other stuff for remote SSH and Telnet to function correctly because it goes to a single IP address and then it's got to know which computer to actually go to. It's not too hard to learn how to set that stuff up, but if you can't even log in remotely to your router, yeah, you got a little bit of a learning curve ahead of you. SSH, the first time you connect, it creates a whole security authentication key with the client, and then from that point on, it will just be able to encrypt data back and forth. It updates the keys sometimes. That's going to be with a particular client program and computer. Another one, whatever. Usually you just have to hit yes, okay, and as long as everything's set up, you should be fine. If it doesn't, it's going to give you errors, like if it can't set the authentication or communicate with that and everything. A lot of people use a program called Putty, and you probably already realized the joke. Putty, as in like putty, Play-Doh, whatever, and then Putty, tele typewriter. Yes, there's constant jokes and anything related to computers. The amount of like Monty Python references is literally insane. But there's plenty of others. Most will probably support at least Telnet, SSH, local serial, probably our logon. Putty isn't available for Android or iOS, so you have to use other options there. But everything by default should run just fine. I decided to get a little bit fancy and sort of outline the SSH process here. Hadn't really done flow charting on Google Sheets slides, to be honest. You start the client, server accepts connection, you exchange keys and set up encryption. Then there's server authentication, and then you've got your user authentication. That's where you type in username and password, creates a session, and it puts that session into the default login shell. Now I keep mentioning shells, but what are they? Well, it's a command interpreter that provides text-based interface between the user and the operating system. People would be more familiar with it if they ran MS-DOS. There was some other stuff, actually. Some people argue that Windows 3 was essentially a shell, but there's a lot of argument that it was a full-fledged operating system. You can get some serious fights over that, by the way. There were a lot of people who liked MS-DOS enough that they really didn't want to go to Windows. Even in my case, I would drop back down to MS-DOS to do a lot of things because that's what I was used to. Usually supports some kind of scripting, and it basically just acts as a simple interface in Linux. Now, the most common one is Bash. This is born again shell, and this is pretty much the standard. Like just about any system you're dropped into is probably going to use Bash. It's derived from an earlier shell known as Bourne, which was used with Unix. I'm sorry. So Born Again shell became the first shell for Linux, as Linux was basically to make a free open source system that operated like Unix. And then we have Dash, that's Debian Elmquest shell. I don't really know much about that. Actually, I don't know much about most of these shells. Z shell, Fish, Friendly Interactive shell, K shell, Corn shell, C shell, which I've used a little bit. Um, a lot of its syntax and commands are made to give you kind of a similar feel to programming in C. It's probably one of the oldest shells. And actually, it's not even Linux. It goes all the way back to the original BSD in the 70s. It's becoming increasingly uncommon. There is a sort of an upgrade to it called Telnex C shell. It added C shell and then it added some Tenex, Tenex, not sorry, Telex. But I mean, even that in part goes back to at least the 80s. Most of the tutorials, the overwhelming majority about them, will focus on Bash since it's just the universal default for Unix-like systems, especially these days. But you will definitely be able to find tutorials on any shell environment that you find. Now, the first really unique thing that you'll see is known as Raspberry Config. This is the official configuration tool for the Raspberry Pi. I think you might be able to find it and set it up even if you're not using Raspberry Pi OS, although I have not tried. Just gives you a simple text-based menu to change important system settings. Otherwise, you'd have to go directly into files, open them up like text files, and make those kind of adjustments. You got your system settings, changing password, setting that host name. If you're having host name regret, you can set it again. You'll probably have to reboot, but it's not a big deal. Configure the boot behavior. You want your desktop, your command line. Again, as I've mentioned, it's very easy to change it. You can enable, disable SSH, enable or disable VNC, which is basically a remote desktop thing. Uh, oh yeah, let's see. Configure network interfaces, your Wi-Fi, your Ethernet if you need to make adjustments. Um, Hardware interfaces. This is where, again, it's the Raspberry Pi. Enable, disable I2C, SPI, UART, one wire, various camera interfaces. Why is there an option to disable this stuff? Because if somebody gets into it, they could do things basically. But if the box is always kind of be with you at home, private space, I wouldn't worry too much at that point. Um, you might want to there's some performance tuning, probably advanced features, overclocking, basically make the computer run faster, but at a cost for it kind of affects its life and more heat, etc. I wouldn't mess with any of this on even on a 5 just yet. GPU, you can set the memory split on how that works. You can set up login shell options. There's localization. There's some advanced options. The first one to look at is expanding file system. Now, I think nowadays it should do that automatically, but if it hasn't, use that option. You can change between Wayland and X11. Stay with Wayland if you can. You may have some issues, maybe possibly with that, or not have the option available at all with the Model 3s. You can set some bootloader options. At least on the 4 and 5 you can. Most of all these changes, for the most part, just assume it needs a reboot afterwards. Now this is Raspberry config on a 3B plus. We've got our wireless, our audio, because there's a 3.5 millimeter jack on the Model 3s. It might have disappeared with the 4, but it definitely disappeared with the 5. Oops. Host name, boot, which one we want to do. I'm having it currently boot into text just to save resources. Let's see what else we got. We got the interface. We got SSI. We got RPI Connect, VNC. Let's see, SPI I2 serial port, etc. Also, the ability whether or not to use the GPIO pins from remote or not. Let's see, performance, just the overlay system stuff. Localization, advanced options. We've got our file system expanse, proxy stuff, internet stuff, beta access. Oh, I guess we can switch between X and Wayland on this one. Audio config, some other stuff. And then we can use this tool to see if it needs a newer one. Shouldn't, because I think I upgraded everything recently. Yep. Okay. So that's Raspberry config on that. Now going over to my Raspberry Pi 5. Let's look at some of the other options. Also tells us the exact thing that is up here. Rev 1.1, 8 gigabytes of RAM. System options. We got a few other things. Auto, splash, some other stuff here. Web browser. Logging. Oh, actually, this is still mentioning the audio. I guess it just goes back. It's you no longer can do anything. Um, let's see. Display options. Oh, I guess you can do on-screen keyboard. That's probably only going to work with the desktop GUI, obviously. Um, Monitor used for the on-screen. Okay, well, we only got one connected. Whoops. Change that. Change it. Oh, it's going to do some stuff here. Let's look at interfaces, SSH, and all this other stuff. Pretty similar to the other one. Let's see, performance. Oh, there's a USB current limit. Let's see, localization's the same. Advanced options. We've got some other stuff here now. Audio config, and of course we now have PCIe, so we can actually set that. I'm just going to keep it disabled for now since I'm not using it. Network install stuff, and I think that's about it with Raspi config. Now, another thing that makes this a Raspberry Pi is its GPIO header. Models 3, 4, and 5, they use the same 40 pin. That might have started with Model 2. I did have a Model 1, and that was like 20 something pins, but same physical layout, same pin numbering. How some of those pins work may differ a little bit between 3, 4, and 5. So consult resources for those specific models just in case. Power is 3.3 volts. It's on 1. 5 volts it's on 2. And then we have another on 4 for another 5 volts. So if you need to plug in power, you got, well, two options if it has to be 5 volt, one option if it's 3.3. Keep in mind all these pins are going to work off 3.3 volt logic, so be careful feeding them 5 volts into just about anywhere. You've got grounds on 6, 9, 14, 20, 25, 30, 34, and 39. You've got a lot of grounds. You don't need to stretch pins. There's a good reason for this. They're all connected to a ground plane. That way you don't have to pull the wires far. Because as I've explained in other videos, having power and ground connect near each other is a good thing. Well, mostly a good thing. You got your I2C, you got your I2Cs on 3 and 5, your UART on 8 and 10, you got SPI on 19, 21, 23, 24, 26. It has two chip enable lines. That's a chip select, I think. You've got pulse width modulation on 12, 32, 33, and 35. Mind you, the number for pins can go a couple of different ways. You got your physical pins known as board numbering. You've got your GPIO numbering, which is known as BCM. And then sometimes you'll still encounter wiring pi numbering, but wiring pi is obsolete. But if you want to use it, it has a numbering system, especially when it was a lot more important. It's really common to use a breakout pi wedge connected to a breadboard so that you can use the pins a little closer to how you would do it with a Nano or a Pico or whatever. Now, here's a question. What works and what doesn't? There's a lot of information about Linux in general, probably more than there is about Windows, to be honest. Most commands, packages, applications, they work pretty well across most of the Linux spectrum, especially distributions that are modern. I mean, if you try to get into Slackware or something, there is a line, a divide there. Distributions of Linux are not like versions of Windows or Mac OS. It's a branching family that handles things differently, may have different things, specialized systems, but a lot of the stuff's the same. If you're using a PiOS, if you're using PiOS, that's just a variant distribution of Debian distribution of Linux. It's just been tailored to operate on the Raspberry Pi, but again, not the only option. There's not just one OS for Pi, even though it's pretty good OS. Tutorial about pages about the Raspberry Pi OS are probably the most ideal. They'll cover things very specifically. Pages about Debian Linux, pretty good too. But things that might be specific to using an ARM processor or the Pi, you might have to get specific information instead of just looking on Debian Linux as it runs on 8664. If a package can be pretty easily installed with the advanced package tool, then you can probably use it on the Pi. There may be recommendations. Something might say, hey, this doesn't run so well on an ARM processor. This needs a certain amount of RAM. Don't put this on a Pi. You'll just cry. Advice like that. Um, you can look into it. But for a lot of basic stuff, don't worry about it. It'll give you basically a package is just a basic unit of software. It's really all it is. It's got the programs, it's got metadata, it's got dependency information, and will download the dependencies automatically or check to see if there are in your system. There's configuration and maintenance scripts with it often. There's information about version and package architecture. Keep in mind that everything takes up space. So this is where we go back to what size of micro SD XC card that you use. Again, 32 gigabytes, you have some room for some stuff. You're going to have a lot more room at 64 or 128. Um, so in terms of programming, this is where using a full-fledged computer, a Pi, a single board computer really shine. You are using a full computer. You basically have your pick of languages, as long as it's something that can run on ARM Linux. The only limitations being maybe a language that can take advantage of Pi features, but that might not be important to you. You can even use this to program Arduino on an Arduino. Very easy. They already have the stuff out. It's command line interpreter or Arduino One, I think. So yeah, you could plug in an Arduino via the USB. You could program it. Um, MicroPython, CircuitPython are very popular for microcontroller boards, but in this case, you can use full blast Python 3 on the Pi. You can also use C, C++, Java, PHP, although you're really going to be using that within the context of HTML probably. JavaScript, Rust, that's a very popular language that everybody's learning. Go, also known as Golang. TypeScript, that's sort of an extension, I guess, of JavaScript. You can program in Bash, and all the other shells, command line interpreters, etc. Um, and most, if not a lot of these, actually have libraries for using the GPIO header and other Pi features from, Pi. And I'm not going to run it. Actually, I just realized that I put Java twice in there. But yeah, pretty much everything, even C Sharp, .NET stuff as well. All right, let's take a look and using PuTTY to log on via SSH. Now, I've got multiple devices set up here, and I'm going to select one of them and load. Then I'm going to hit open. Okay, so we've logged on with SSH, and let's see what it's actually been doing from the log here. It's telling you what it's used. It's setting up the key. It's already done some of this work in previous sessions, and you can see it initializing the various keys. This is what makes it secure. Somebody could tap into the physical line, and they'll just get encrypted garbage. I'm sure somebody out there knows a way to get through this, but for your purposes, don't worry about this. So we've got our logon screen. So I'm going to log in, username, and then the that host name is basically based on what you're logging in with a host name. And then enter the password, which is going to look blank. You're not going to see even asterisks or anything because that would give away the length of the password. And then click it, and you've got it. You've got it's Linux, you've got your host name, you've got various information about your operating system here. This is using bookworm version of Raspberry Pi. They always give some interesting little names here. Architecture information. They're making it clear Debian, and then GNU for Linux. Linux is really kind of describing this tiny bit of a core in the middle, and then everything else is built up around it, which is why distributions and versions aren't the same thing. Um, Yada yada yada. Last time you logged in, and then you've got the local host. You've got username at, and this is command line. This is not the desktop version, but I will show that. So if you want to do anything, I guess start with ls. That's going to list files and directories. You can also do. No, this doesn't work. No, maybe. Yeah, there we go. Using it with -L, that shows everything, plus it shows details. If you do leave ls, set h, no ls. For some reason, I can't remember. It's not showing, I don't think it's showing hidden files and all that, but I've got folders for all sorts of stuff. Now, the actual thing we're in, let's just go, we'll back up all the way to the root directory, and we'll go to home. This is usually where user home directories are, but this is everything, just about everything in Linux can be configured. So if you log on to somebody else's system, it may not be the same. We put in the username, so now we're in /home/gc1co. This is shortened to a tilde, which is your home directory. That's an environment variable in the shell. We are using bash, so, but we can change that. Let's change it to, I don't know, C shell. Okay, maybe there's not that. Let's see. Just exit out of that. All right, let's say we don't want to use bash. Well, let's see what shells are already installed. Now, you can always install others. That's not a problem. Let's see if this works. All right, so we got, what do we got? We got bash, we got rbash, and dash. I think that's just about the only things we've got installed. We could install others if we really wanted to. Um, but yeah, bash, because you're already in it. See, we're already in it. Let's do, I don't know, let's do rbash. See what that gives us. Anything? Okay, I think rbash is just a variant of bash. I don't remember the specifics. Let's look at dash. Okay, is that gonna give us something else? Now, in the case when you bring up other ones, let's see. Nope. Let's see. No, okay, we don't actually have that, but we can install it. Let's do install, I don't know, C shell. Let's see what happens. All right, see, it's loading up a package, it's installing it, and we're installed. All right, what happens when we do C shell? Okay, we've now got something else here. I used a little bit of C shell in the past. This is, I know this is the regular one, so I can't entirely remember, but we can exit out of it, go to bash. Let's install another one. Now, usually these packages, some of these packages are pretty small, but it'll tell you what you need to do. Okay, we've got another one. All right, so this is a bit different. What do we do? Oh, okay. Man, maybe? Okay. Let's exit out of that. Put in dash. Now, mind you, this is operating a shell inside another shell. All right, let's see what else we can do. Well, we know our list command already. You know, AL, that's going to list the hidden stuff as well. The stuff with the dot in the front, period in front, those are hidden. And putting a dot in front like that is what makes them hidden. Some things are essentially just shortcuts, really. Um, you can make shortcuts like you would see in Windows. Actually, Windows got that behavior from Linux, and it kind of simplified it. There's a lot of different options in Linux for how you want to do that sort of thing, hard links, soft links, mirrors, etc. Probably get into it in a later video. But I've made a couple of different folders for things. Let's see, Arduino. Oh, oh no, it's restricted. That's weird. Hmm. Okay. Oh, maybe because our bash or something. Weird. Let's oh, yeah, okay, there we go. Um all right, we got libraries here. You just use CD and a space for what do you want to set to the current directory. You can actually do a lot of things with this, like use CD tilde, it's going to take you right to the home directory. If you do one period, that's just the current directory. Two periods, that's the directory above it. Do two more. We're at the root directory, so our root directory is always a forward slash and then forward slash home, another forward slash, and then the name of the user, and you're back in your home directory. Again, all of this can be configured. So always try to figure out on a specific system. But this is assuming you have a Pi, you can configure the Pi how you want. You're going with the default options. But yes, you have your own little server here. There's all sorts of things like devices are in folders. So there's a lot of stuff here. I don't even know half of it, to be honest. But this is an easy way to access everything once you figure out. You've got your TTYs, that's your terminal sessions. You have, let's see, what else? Disk. You can actually get lost, pretty easily lost by this, going through the directories. You've got your file systems. Now, one joke is slash dev null. That's basically nothing. Does it even list it here? Yeah, it does. So if you want to send an output to, you got to send it to something, but you don't care, that's sending it to dev null. It's been a bit of a pop culture joke, at least those with Linux for many, many decades. You've got other stuff. You've got directly accessing parts of RAM. Everything is just basically treated as a folder in Linux. Um, GPIO stuff. Let's see. Now, cat will just list a file, and I believe concatenation, maybe that's what it's supposed to stand for. So I got a little bit of output here that I did earlier for the camera that I have attached to the Pi. I don't think it's attached right now. Um, but this is the information that I got when I got it, just so I had it in front. Um, let's see, what's in bookshelf? Okay, that's just a manual in PDF. It assumes, I guess. Commander Pi is something I installed. I don't think I have installed. Okay. Let's see. Well, I don't know, C++ stuff, which doesn't have much in it. Just the example that I used for the intro to programming video. Uh, there's desktop downloads, documents, kind of meant for the desktop GUI to mirror what you might see in Windows. Not sure if anything is there. I don't know. There's a few things. Okay. Um, I got Java. I got JavaScript and stuff. Yeah, there's also music, pictures, video. But yeah, there's not a lot in most of these. apps. Let's see what's in there. There's a couple of things. Yeah, I believe this is a little GUI program for doing updating. Yeah, lots of stuff. Now, let's see what kind of memory we have. Well, we can do this with free, but these numbers may be a little confusing. So we can, well, let's see what happens if we do dash H. Oh, okay, that's gonna do it in gigs. All right, so the memory on top is our 8 gigs of RAM. I've got a real power horse here with a 5. And then how much it's using, really not all that much at the moment, but it's under no real load. But yeah, keep in mind the operating system, the way this is set up, is using a pretty good chunk. Free, shared in some other information. And then we have our swap memory. That's memory that's at least temporarily stored on the hard drive. So at the very least, it's using a swap file of 32 gigs. I believe I have a 128 gig card in this thing. Let's see. Now let's see if we want to see how much hard drive space there is. Our micro SD card is basically our hard drive. So let's do DF. All right, well, this is going to show the different file systems. It's not just one thing on the card. It is split down into a couple of things. We've got like firmware, we've got ZRAM, etc. What we're looking at the most here mounted on this right here is our root directory. So let's make this a little easier to read. Let's do an H. All right, this is going to put it in gigs. So let's see, our root right now, that's got 117 gigs set aside for it, and we're already using 28 gigs, but we've got plenty of room with 84. This should give you an idea of how much of an SD card, like 32, I mean, would cover this installation, but it would only give you so much more room. Now, other parts of this are used for temporary file. The things, essentially, some of this is the ability to fix the main installation if something goes horribly wrong. You've also got the firmware here, 510 megabytes. I guess this would basically be equivalent to sort of BIOS on a standard PC, or actually, it's now UEFI. I've still never learned to pronounce that as an acronym. We've got some, we got our ZRAM. This is our swap memory that I talked about, and some other stuff. So yeah, we've got tons of room. We're using like, I don't know, a sixth of how much room we have, maybe fifth. Math was not my strong suit. I don't know. Let's do other slashes. Well, this does it in megabytes. Okay, it's just TF in general. But yeah, there's how you're going to tell the difference. Free's going to tell you your essentially RAM and your swap. Mind you, certain systems this may be different, and then DF is going to give you your hard drive information. Now you might want to wonder, all right, so I've already showed you cat, but there's also one called tail. Now, if you don't give proper information, it'll put you into like a little prompt here. So you might say, I don't know, catch camera. See what it is. -5. Yeah, just do usually a control C will get you out of there. So let's do. I don't remember here. Okay. So this is going to give you a certain amount of information. It's going to allow you to scroll. If you want to get out of this, just go with that. You can also put things into the background as well. But let's move on to, there are two text editors. Actually, the most classic one would be VI and Emacs. They were essentially designed off two different operating system fields. I wouldn't use those now unless you really want to get to use them. I mean, each one literally came with a hefty manual and a certain intuition to use either. If you ask which is better, you will start a holy war, quite literally. I think people have practically died, maybe even literally died. Usenet news groups and intellectuals and academics are a feisty bunch. But yeah, we can go into something Nano or Pico. Pico is older. It's what I grew up on using. I didn't even enter the VI Emacs world. If I mentioned I use Pico, people would hand me an Etch-a-Sketch and say, here's a computer. Let's go into Pico. Now, Pico started life as basically an email editor, and then it got expanded. You have bunches of different options here, but your mouse is only going to do so much in a terminal, so you can type whatever, I guess. You do Control O to write it out, give it a name. Let's just call it test, and Control X to exit out. We have our file test. Let's concatenate. All right, there's all our information. What if we want to do tail on it? Brings that up, keeps doing. Control C. Let's see, what are the other options for tail? Okay, follow, output. Okay, we can output, basically allows us to output the last lines of a file, but we have a lot of different options we can do. How many options we want to output. This makes it great for using it for a log file where you probably only want to look at the last couple of things that are happening. Um, yeah, retry if it's accessible, sleep, etc. As I said, tail is really good for a log file, so you might bring it up because more information might come into that file from somewhere else, and then it'll just live update it. Let's see. Head, I believe, does the opposite. Yeah, first lines of a program. It just said it's been a while. Now, there's some weird stuff here. Some neat, weird stuff you can do. Let's remove. Okay, so remove. The flags are recursive and forced. Be very careful with that command. You can delete everything in your directory with that. Um, and never use that with sudo. Oh yeah, that's another thing we should mention. Now su goes into the super user account. Now I'm not entirely sure what the password that is on mine, but I'm just going to exit out of it. What you usually want to do is sudo. Now, if an account has root access, then it can do a sudo. So it tells super user account to do this without logging into the super user account. Often you'll need to actually do this for doing anything that the owner of a machine or administrator would need to do, like installing new packages. So we could do, let's just say, full upgrade. It's going to check. Oh, okay, nothing to upgrade. We could do update. It's going to check a lot more. And you can add certain places to check for things in files too. Well, couldn't resolve one of them, so that can be an issue. But that's because this was checking for ARM cord. I set that up, and apparently it doesn't. It can't reach the server for some reason. Oh no. Okay. Let's see. App list upgradable. So it's telling me two things. Let's see. Flash ROM and generic boot box 64. I can't remember what those are specifically. But that's fine. All right. Well, let's see. Let's just do. Let me think. I'll output that. Yes, I guess so. All right. Let's. All right. There we go. But what if we want to do something? We want to save information. Well, let's see. Let's check our hard disk space again. Now, we could have it display on the screen, or we could output it to a file. And there you go. If you want to do that with an input, go in that direction. Output, go in that direction. Um, test. All right. Now let's see what test has in it. And there you go. Now, this isn't being regularly updated, but there are ways to set that up in more advanced features. Uh, yeah, there you go. And let's just remove that file. But let's see, what else could we get? There's vcgen command, gives you a bunch of different options, things you can check out. Let's see, let's do, you know what, let's measure the temperature. Let's measure temperature. And let's see what we're looking at. This is going to give the CPU temperature specifically, not the GPU. Right now we're running at 53.8 Celsius, which is great. It's inside the range of cool. While the range starts at like 20 or 30 Celsius, yeah, you're not going to reach down to that um, unless everything's so utterly throttled. But yeah. So yeah, 53.8 is great. I wouldn't even start to worry until it went north of 70. Uh, let's see, what else can we get? Let's see. Let's get Mim. Whoop. Okay, that didn't work. Why not? Looking right at it. Oh, okay. I guess it just returned maybe some kind of protection. Let's see. I don't know, bootloader config. Let's see what that tells us. All right. It's not set to wake on GPIO. It will power off when it's halted, which is halts the CPU, but it doesn't necessarily turn off the power. Let's see, what else do we got? Your voltage. Oh, let's look at what our voltage numbers look. Okay, so that's what it's currently drawing in terms of voltage, but I couldn't tell you what that number specifically refers to. Let's see, what else do we got? Oh, version. What's that going to tell us? Okay. Power monitor. I don't know. No, it's missing arguments. Okay. Let's see. It's missing arguments, so I can't precisely remember. What else can we do in here? There is, okay, so you can run things in the background with the and symbol there. Okay, well, let's run nano in the back. Oh, whoops. All right, for some reason I just reversed that. I didn't mean to do that. All right, let's do nano. It's gonna put us in the background. Okay, so it's now running, but it's in the background. So we can do FG to bring it back to the foreground. We've now exited out. Let's see, we can't do that again because there's no more job. Now, if we want to see what's running in the background, jobs, okay, well, there's nothing. Let's go back to, okay, that's set into the background. Let's put something else in the background. Okay, this is set up so it'll only do, okay, both of those are already stopped. All right, foreground, okay, that goes into nano, jobs, okay. It was stop, okay. Oh, no, wait, sorry, that was Pico. Now nano, let's see. We want to see everything running into the hood. Whoops. Yes. So for the user, these are the processes that are running. We've got three things of bash and rbash, so maybe we could kill one of those, or we could just do log out. Oh no, exit. Okay. Okay, we've logged back on. Let's do PS again. We just ran PS, which is why it's in the list, and then we've got bash. Let's do all. This will give us more information now. This shows us that we're on TTY1, so we're on a virtual terminal. Basically as far as the operating system is concerned, we might as well be on a terminal connected to it for most purposes. Now we can get a little fancier than some of this. So let's do top. This is actually going to give us a real life listing of all the processes running on this Pi or this computer. And it's a lot of stuff, really. Now, a lot of these things have to do with the fact that a desktop is running. If desktop wasn't running, it'd probably cut down about half of these. Some of these are daemons. They're things that provide services. Let's see. Let's look for something specific. Accounts daemon, that runs basically the account system. Let's see, dbus. We got Bluetooth daemon running right down there. So we could use Bluetooth devices. LightDM, that's part of desktop. We got even a server. There's even a thing for login and getting the TTY. SSH right there. There's the agent for it. But yeah, just Control C to get out of that. Here's a prettier version of top. Gives us a lot more information. You bring this up, people can think of you as some kind of file administrator. It gives you active uh, charts. You know how many tasks are running, things being throttled, load times, up times. Oh yeah, so that's and then you can just go through using the F keys if you really want. Even in DOS, once upon a time, this is how things looked. All right, let's see, I don't know, do uptime. This tells us It has three or has had three users, the load averages, and then the time it's been up. It has been up for 15 hours and 37 minutes. But yeah, that should be a good introduction to the command line in Bash. Other videos will get into more detail, like my programming one already has showing you how to program via Bash in a bunch of different languages. Now, here's just a quick thing of remote shell. It's automatically going to log you in, but in a web browser. But we've got pretty much the same thing. Uh, this can be a little prettier to look at, though. Oh, who command. Now, where it says PTS/0, that's this session, I believe, and then TTY. Actually, no, maybe it's the opposite. Uh, no, TTI1 is RSSH. Yeah, you can be logged in with multiple sessions. Yeah, we can look at things pretty much the same. What does top look like? Yeah, same thing. HTOP. This can be, using Raspberry Pi Connect can be an easier way to get at all of this remotely, especially if you're on something that can't support whatever, as long as it can open a browser window. So let's get out of that. All right, so our Pi is running a desktop and we're connected remotely to it. And this is still just in a web browser. Now you can do this with the 3, but it's not going to be usable. You're going to move your cursor and it's still going to be in the same spot for like a minute. But you could at least use it to tell that it is running a desktop at the moment. With the 4, that's somewhere in the middle. It's going to be, you see even a little bit of lag here, but it's very doable. I've set up temperature meters here. I can go full screen. That should make it. So here's our Pi apps thing we were talking about. Let's execute it. All right. We've got things. It says, let's see, anything with updates? Okay, let's update now. Still going to bring up a terminal window telling you all of this information. But it's going to do the hard parts for you. See, it's already running all the packager management stuff. All right, let's, now that that's done, I've got wallpaper here. We've got the browser. Now, this is going to take a hot minute. I don't know why it's doing the new keyring thing here, but I'm just going to cancel it out. This is Chromium. Let's just go to a random site. Got this set to dark mode, so it's not always great. Yeah, this is only running with 8 gigabytes of RAM, and it's on an ARM processor, so it's not going to be quite up there with a modern computer, unless you got a really old one. Most computers are going to come with at least 16 megabytes and a much better processor, but still, the gap is narrowing. A number of different programs installed here. Actually, I want to remove this. Now, messing around with things, this can be a little trickier for uninstalling. Got programming stuff. I mean, we got a IDE as well. I think this is, yeah, okay, this is, yeah, 1.8.19, so this is an older one, but it still does what you needed to do. You could still plug in an Uno via USB. bunch of different system tools. I've put up Midnight Commander and a couple other things. Um, this is supposed to give you the feel of like Norton Commander back in the day on DOS. This is very frequently used, and early versions of Windows 1 and 2, they weren't really too much better. There really wasn't a point to buy them, so you didn't really see that installed much. You used a lot of other things for file management and whatnot. I'm just going to exit out of the window entirely. Let's see, here's Commander Pi. Okay, so this is going to tell us some information here. Architecture, memory usage, another thing for our temperature, which is still looking great. Our specific model, as far as I know, there's not Model A's of either the 4 or 5. Model A just met no Ethernet. And then the revision, this can be important under certain circumstances. Look at tool, we can look at this. It's a little Indian. It's got 4 cores. And then here's the core type, an 8076. Our bootloader information. Essentially information we get off in individual text files, but here it goes. Networking stuff. So Ethernet's not connected to anything the Wi-Fi is. Overclocking, if you want to get into that, well, I might have another video on overclocking. Don't touch this for now. Let's see. GPS tools. You probably don't want to change anything with this. See add-ons. Yeah. Adding, removing software. Oh, okay. Let's see if we can install that. It wants the super user password. Oh, all right, we should be good now. Got our documents folder. Yeah, we've got basic file management here. But yeah, this is what the default desktop basically looks like. Uh, Pi's set up. We got uh, Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, system clock, etc. Now, just to wrap things up, setup for all of this is going to be pretty similar. The video focused on 3, 4, and 5. Major differences between those is the microprocessor, the amount, type of RAM, etc. I remind you that heat and temperature are factors, especially in the newer models. The threes don't usually require a fan, but you might still use one. Highly recommended for the four, and it's basically required for the five. Heat sinks are also important. Aluminum cases can also help with heat. Your micro SD XC card is very important. Modern systems, you're going to want at least 32 gigs. Don't even look at 8 or 16. 256 and above might be overkill though, especially the price point. You want A2 and U3 ratings, highly recommended. It's going to, otherwise, it's going to impact your access times, general system performance. The initial setup with the operating system, you've got configuration stuff to do. You can also decide desktop or classic command line. Tutorials for the Pi OS specifically are the best. Debian's still going to be pretty good, although it might omit things that are ARM specific or specific to the Pi. General Linux ones are still going to be pretty good, but they may have some commands that aren't native to Debian or Pi OS. Like if a tutorial is talking about Red Hat, it uses different systems for installing packages. I talked about PiConnect. It's the official service for providing remote access, both desktop and a shell. I talked about SSH. It's a secure way of connecting to command line to the shell. Um, and as I mentioned, this is a full-fledged computer. The sky's almost the limit for programming language options. I also talked about the GPIO header. It's one of the things that makes a Pi a Pi. Until next time, have a good one.